I can't be exhausted. I mean, there are two reasons why I can't be exhausted. The one is I cannot feel the psychic toll that seeing your skin colour once again used as a stick with which to beat public figures can apply to me. It can never apply to me. Even if you found somebody who was deploying racist tropes about white-skinned people, such is the privilege and power that white people enjoy in this population at this point in history, that it would never feel discriminatory. You could line up 50 people of colour screaming all sorts of abuse about white-skinned people, and it really wouldn't matter in the great scheme of things, because they have no power to hurt me institutionally, politically, legislatively. It is why the best definition of racism I've come across over the years is prejudice plus power, something that some people work incredibly hard to pretend not to understand. So I can't be exhausted on that level. And the other reason why I can't be exhausted is loyalty. The other reason why I can't be exhausted is loyalty to you, and the knowledge that when you are exhausted, my job is to remind everybody, whether they're exhausted or not, why this is an important moment in our story, why this is a really important moment in our story. And that means that I can't come on air and talk about exhaustion. I mentioned to you yesterday that my inbox contained the words tired and exhausted more than any others, because for people of colour, for women of colour, for black women specifically yesterday, it felt like a day of intolerable burden. How can this even be a story? I think that the decision we took together to treat it as a opportunity to vent and condemn was completely correct. Gratifying yesterday as the day progressed to see only a few fairly fetid corners of the media pretending that this was some sort of debate, that this was some sort of dialogue, that this was a conversation that could accommodate some sort of balance. The idea that there would be a counterpoint to the statement that what Frank Hester had said was truly disgusting, profoundly racist, and possibly insightful. All of that is just true, but it doesn't stop it being any less exhausting. And in some ways, I presume it becomes even more exhausting today, because today the tail has started wagging, if you like. The attempts to obfuscate, the attempts to do something other than what is obviously necessary. A profound condemnation. You cannot call for Frank Hester to do anything. He's an extremely rich private individual. He claims he's apologised, but he hasn't. He's apologised for being rude. He hasn't apologised for being racist or for calling for Diane Abbott to be shot, which makes some of the comments by senior politicians yesterday, some of the very late in the day comments by the Women and Equalities Minister. I can at least pause there to have a sniggle, can't we? The Women and Equalities Minister, Kemi Badenoch, and the Prime Minister shortly afterwards, Rishi Sunak, coming out with a form of words that sought to pour oil upon the waters of discontent, but in many ways, if you were paying attention, and frankly you should have been, but if you weren't, don't worry, I was, sought to pour oil on the water, but in many ways made things worse. So we find ourselves today looking at the desperation of Rishi Sunak's cabinet to move on from this. Just as we said yesterday, in the absence of what needs to be done, which is a straight condemnation, a disassociation, and the return of the money. Philip Cowley, the esteemed columnist, makes a fairly powerful point, or a pertinent point, that one of the reasons perhaps why the Tories would be reluctant to do that is because Frank Hester could turn around and give the money to one of the sort of increasingly extreme parties, even further to the right than the Conservative Party, that seem to be fighting over it's usually between 10 and 15% of the vote, isn't it? So, I think that happened once before, didn't it? Didn't Aaron Banks increase his donation to, I forget what party it was, it could have been UKIP or the Brexit Party or whatever they were calling themselves at the time, whatever the publicity vehicle designed exclusively to propel Nigel Farage into the forefront of public life in Britain was called at the time. I'm pretty sure that Banks chap increased his donation after a Conservative politician said something mean about him. So the fear that the money will go to your rivals and improve their ground game may perhaps be propelling some of the Tory failure to do what is obviously right, what is obviously correct. So the question of why aren't they doing it currently only has 10 million answers. Why aren't they doing it? 10 million pounds. Why aren't they saying to him, we cannot have anything more to do with you? Answer, 10 million pounds. I don't think there's any room for further conversation or debate. If he'd donated £5, they'd have slung him out by his ear. They'd have hung him out to dry. If he'd donated £50, he'd be under a bus, metaphorically speaking. If he had donated probably £500,000, he would be surplus to requirements, persona non grata, heading for the door. But he's donated £10 million. £10 million. I think the largest donor currently in the game. Because the sensible ones have all tacked towards the centre and started backing the Labour Party, and the insensible ones have all started giving money to the coterie of increasingly far-right parties, even further to the right of the Tory party, setting up television stations and trying to buy newspapers. So there's not a lot left to fight for. And this Frank Hester character seems to have his fingers on most of the money that is left to fight for the Tories. So there are 10 million reasons why it doesn't happen. Where do you want to start today? I'm going to start, if I may, with... Actually, let's start with some of the comments coming from Kevin Hollinrake this morning, who is the Post Office Minister, but he drew the short straw. He has to go out and try to defend the indefensible. And then I'm going to tell you the thing that upset me most yesterday. And do you know what? I'm not going to apologise to you for using the word upset. I mentioned to you yesterday that when Sadiq Khan used the word heartbroken, it jarred me. It jarred me. It moved racism out of the context of conversations we have on the radio into the real and lived experience of friends and colleagues and public figures. And he talked about being heartbroken, and the conversation about 30p Lee ceased to be a topic or a line of questioning, and it became a moment of humanity. I felt that Diane Abbott visited similar territory yesterday when she talked about being frightened, when she referenced being a single woman and therefore already conscious of her vulnerability in the public space. And she processed the news, not only that a man who has given £10 million to her colleagues on the Conservative benches in the House of Commons had called for her to be shot, but that her colleagues were not sufficiently perturbed or repulsed by this rhetoric to return the money and tell Frank Hester to sling his hook. That became a moment of humanity. Heartbroken, frightened, hurt. These aren't topics. These aren't lines of inquiry to pull off a piece of paper when a politician is sitting in front of you. These are instances of shared humanity about which we should all be heartbroken, frightened, hurt. And we're not. Kevin Hollinrake certainly isn't.
Clearly, donations are important for all political parties. I think one of the things you would judge when anybody's making a donation is this person the right kind of person to be making a donation? Is somebody racist?
And the answer is,
as far as I know, Mr. Hester, and I don't know him from what he said. He accepts his comments were wrong and they were racist, and he's apologised for them. So I don't think that means Mr. Hester is a racist, but that's a judgment others will make if somebody wants to make a donation.
He can say racist things, but he himself is not racist.
Well, if you say racist things and don't apologise for them, that would make you a racist. But I think if you say something racist and then apologise, that's a different thing, I think.
Why? Why would, on the evidence of our own eyes, I don't know him either, you don't know him, he said something racist here, which he has apologised for, but he is apparently not a racist person.
Well, I know of people, we all come across people at times that say racist things, but are not racist. And I think that's, I say he said something that was wrong, he said something that was inappropriate, he said it in a completely different context, but I think the way he said that does connect somebody's skin colour with their character, which is the wrong thing to do, and that's why he's apologised.
Do you think this man is the right character to have an OBE still?
As I say, as far as I don't know Mr. Hester, he's apologised for what he said. His comments were wrong. Those comments were racist in the context he said them. So he's apologised for them. That's what we should judge people by. If you make a mistake, do you apologise for it? That's clearly what he has done.
There's a massive problem here. There is a huge problem here. And it is the very simple fact that Frank Hester has not apologised for being racist. He has not acknowledged that his comments were racist. He has apologised for being rude. And that's why I found Kemi Badenoch's comments yesterday at best disingenuous and at worst pretty gross. I don't know how you feel about this. I don't know if you feel that I'm trivialising things, but I'll read you what Kemi Badenoch said. I'll tell you what is disingenuous about it. And then I'll tell you the bit that upset me the most. And I use the word upset. So Badenoch wrote, Hester's 2019 comments, as reported, were racist. I welcome his apology. Abbott and I disagree on a lot, but the idea of linking criticism of her to being a black woman is appalling. It's never acceptable to conflate someone's views with the colour of their skin. Now, she split this into two tweets, which she doesn't, I don't think, have to do because she's got one of those verified grey ticks. So why would you split it into two tweets? And I can tell you as a fairly successful user of Twitter that if you put out a two-tweet thread, the first one gets read 3 to 4 times more than the second one does. So what's in the second one? MPs have a difficult job balancing multiple interests, often under threats of intimidation, as we saw recently in Parliament. Some people make flippant comments without thinking of this context. If I said now that I want someone to shoot Kemi Badenoch, hands up if that would be flippant. Come on. Come on, hands up. Someone, if I called for a politician to be shot, I don't mean it, obviously. No one's actually going to shoot, but I'm calling for it. What if I say it in a funny accent? Would that work? I'd say, oh, someone should shoot Kemi Badenoch. Is that flippant now? No, come on, hands up if it's flippant. Anyone? Some people make flippant comments without thinking of this context. This is why there needs to be space for forgiveness where there is contrition. Well, I have seen no contrition. I have seen a man desperately trying to save his own backside because the 10 million quid he's invested in the hope of at least a knighthood and quite possibly a seat in the House of Lords alongside people like Michelle Mone, Evgeny Lebedev and Daniel Hannan seems to be disappearing over the horizon faster than you can say, what a racist clown. So his 10 million quid investment in a peerage is disappearing over the horizon. He's desperately trying to pretend things aren't as bad as we know they are, so he's apologised for being rude. And up pops the sniggle, Women and Equalities Minister, to claim that it's a flippant comment made out of context and that there should be forgiveness because there is contrition. Problems with this include there is nothing flippant about calling for somebody in public life to be shot. There is nothing flippant about calling for the politician who quite possibly has been on the receiving end of more abuse and more vile, misogynistic and racist insult than any other person alive in this country. At risk of hyperbole, but it's a risk I'm willing to take. There is nothing flippant about any of that, and there is nothing contrite about a man denying he's been racist and apologising for being rude. I need this job some mornings because otherwise I'd think that the world was slipping out of focus. People I respect and admire were queuing up to compliment Kemi Badenoch last night on doing the right thing when she didn't. And I still haven't told you the bit in that twin tweet, that very deliberately separated tweet so that 4,000 people liked the first one but only 1,000 liked the second one. I still haven't told you the bit that upset me the most. That does not deserve praise. That is passing off the comments about Diane Abbott being someone that makes Frank Hester want to hate all black women as flippant. 10 million reasons why Kemi Badenoch, who hopes to be the next leader of the Tory party, would not want to go further. And then, even worse, claiming that there has been contrition when there hasn't. He has not apologised for being racist. He has apologised for being rude. So whether it's Kevin Hollinrake or Kemi Badenoch or Rishi Sunak claiming that some sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Some sort of accommodation has been reached because this man has apologised, they're lying. Whether they're lying to themselves and to you or just to themselves, I do not know. But they are lying. He has not apologised for being racist. He has not accounted for his calls for Diane Abbott to be shot. He has moved into the public space comments, opinions and words that are borderline criminal. Diane Abbott has gone to the police, quite rightly. A man was in Crown Court in this country last month for sending a raccoon emoji to a mixed race. A black man was in Crown Court last month in this country for sending a raccoon emoji to a mixed race Conservative candidate. And that's why I'm really scared today, because I think that they're going to normalise this now. I think you're now going to say, no, you can say what you want. You can call for MPs to be shot if they're black. I'm pretty sure that if the MP in question was white, everyone would be quite rightly talking about David Amess at the moment and Joe Cox, but they're not. We are. I'm pretty sure that this is evidence that they have, whether wittingly or unwittingly, whether consciously or unconsciously. I'm pretty sure that they are hoping that they, and therefore Frank Hester, can get away with this, that Frank Hester emerges with his reputation in tatters, but his status within the Conservative Party undimmed. It's absolutely extraordinary. And I still haven't told you the bit from Kemi Badenoch's intervention that I found the most crass, the most insensitive, the most unpleasant. She could have called her Diane. At the very least, she could have called her Diane Abbott. We refer to politicians by their surnames quite often on the programme for brevity and for impact. But if you're talking about death threats, if you're talking about being a recipient of vile racism, and you are taking the time to put your thoughts down in print, to type them, to read back over what you've written, I don't believe that you accidentally confine your comments to a surname, to the stark singularity of a surname. Abbott, not even Diane, not Diane Abbott. Abbott and I disagree on a lot. The second line, the third sentence of this mealy-mouthed attempt to get herself as Women and Equalities Minister off the hook for failure to act, failure to respond, failure by her entire party to do the right thing. The third sentence, Abbott and I disagree on a lot. Who cares? Your job today is to be Women and Equalities Minister and to stick up for a woman who's on the receiving end of some of the vilest abuse any politician in this country has received in my lifetime. From a public figure, a public-ish figure, a £10 million party donor. And you couldn't even pay her the courtesy of using her Christian name, of using her given name, of calling her what her friends call her. I mean, where do you go next on this? 21 minutes after 10 is the time. I'll tell you what we do. We do what we did yesterday. How do you respond to the idea that it's okay to say racist things, really racist things? It's okay to call for a politician to be shot as long as you apologise for being rude. 0345 6060 973. It's absolutely fine to call for a black politician to be shot as long as you later apologise after being caught for being rude. That's the view of the Prime Minister. That's the view of the Women and Equalities Minister. That's the view of the Post Office Minister. That is the view of the British government. The government of the United Kingdom considers it to be perfectly acceptable for a man to publicly call for a politician to be shot, to describe her in the most profoundly and vile racist terms, as long as he later apologises for being a bit wooed. That's your government. That's your Prime Minister. That's the Prime Minister of every black woman in this country. That's the Women and Equalities Minister who is supposed to speak for every woman in this country, every minority in this country. That's the Conservative Party. That's the British government telling the British people, perfectly fine, as long as you say, sorry for being rude, to call for an elected parliamentarian to be shot, to talk about how she, as a black woman, makes you want to hate all black women. And you issue a pathetic so-called apology mentioning only your own rudeness and claiming that your comments about a black woman making you hate all black women has nothing to do with gender or skin colour, and the Women and Equalities Minister gives you a free pass because she's pretending that you've displayed contrition. The Prime Minister gives you a free pass because he's got a £10 million cheque burning a hole in his pocket. This isn't a party political issue. This is a national issue. This is an issue of patriotism.